next installment of Deep Talks, where we try to explore some questions that a lot of people have that maybe plague their lives or plague their experience of faith. And this morning is one that I get probably more than any other. For some reason, I tend to meet a lot of people who live life in the aftermath of some disappointment. And they leave with the experience questioning not only whether faith is relevant, but they leave the experience questioning life itself. And the question is, why didn't God do something to stop this bad thing that happened? Could be the early death of a spouse. It could be the sickness of a child. Maybe the death of a baby or a miscarriage. And it really shakes them up. And it's an example of the age-old question, why do bad things happen to good people? And I wanted to talk about that in this week of Christmas because in many ways, Christmas is the answer to this question. But it's just not the answer that we expect. And it wasn't the answer that they expected 2,000 years ago. To be honest, most of us want a God who will intervene and stop every bad thing that happens to us. Stop every sickness, stop every potential accident, stop everything that we experience as negative. But we're not exactly consistent in our wishes. On the very same day, you will have a group of families praying in Orlando, Florida, God, please don't have it rain today. We're going to Disney World. We've been saving for 6 months, and we don't want any rain to dampen our festivities. On the very same day, you could have a number of citrus growers in the same area praying, God, we really need it to rain to help our orange crop. So please, may this be the day that it rains. Now, whichever way that day goes, whether it's rain or whether it's clear, there's going to be a group of bitterly disappointed people asking the question, why didn't God do something about my predicament? I just want you to see the dilemma that we get ourselves into very quickly. Always there's someone mad that God didn't do something. Just the other day, I was talking to a group of students, which I get to do from time to time, and I was introducing them to the idea that we live in a world that God does not control. Yeah, I know what some of our choruses say, but we do live in a world where sometimes drunk drivers hit the family in the minivan and the drunk driver walks away and the family doesn't. We live in a world where evil men gain control and use that control for their own purposes. And if people get in the way, well, then the people need to be eliminated. At the end of the class, a lovely young lady came up, kind of stood by the desk, waited for everybody to leave, and then she asked me a couple clarifying questions. And I was talking to her about why sometimes bad things happen, and it's not because God wishes them or wills them, but it's because we live in this condition where sometimes evil still has control, and men who do evil that has control. She told me that for 10 years of her life as a child, she had been abused. And I was stunned at that. She told me that she thought God never cared about her. In stunned sadness, I told her, listen, I'm so sorry. And I want you to listen to one other thing. I told her that God is sorry. And more importantly, I told her that God's heart was broken at the behavior of her abusers and her abuse. But I also told her that her past does not need to determine her future. Even God knows what it is like to be abused. See, God's answer was to come on earth and live among us and experience what it's like to be here, experience what it's like to be sick, experience what it's like to have friends betray them, experience what it's like to have a government gang up against them, experience what it's like to have dictates that aren't exactly fair. And he took all of that, and all of that ended up him being sent to a cross that the religious leaders applauded, that the governmental leaders created, and they were only so happy to conspire together to be sure his influence was no longer. But the good news is that he rose again. He took all of that, experienced all of that, and then said it will no longer have the last word in any of our lives. Doesn't need to be. So this Christmas, let me tell you what God is doing. As 2,000 years ago, as people were wondering why God doesn't do something, a baby was heard crying in Bethlehem. A few years later, a man told a group of men in a storm-tossed boat on the Sea of Galilee to not be afraid. Somewhere, a few days later, a man who had never walked in his life walked for the first time. A bleeding woman was reunited with her family after 12 years of sickness. And a guy named Lazarus told a story that was almost too strange to believe. See, this was not what they thought about when they were praying that they wanted God to do something. But while they were praying, all these things were happening that changed the world. Now, I know that in the middle of this Christmas week, there might be someone here that's experiencing trial or difficulty or hurt or pain, and you wonder why God isn't doing something. Let me just assure you this Christmas that God is still doing something. And because of that, let me wish you a very, very Merry Christmas.